Hi, my name is John Dyke. I'm with Rockwell Automation in our Global Business Development Organization. And with me today is Scott Sandler. Scott?
Hi, John. As John said, I'm Scott Sandler. I work in our Common Architecture and Technology team. My role is Technology Manager for Cloud Computing. And today, John asked me to explain to you what our FactoryTalk Cloud platform is all about. In the Common Architecture and Technology team, we tend to build things that are not necessarily customer-facing themselves, but rather platforms and technologies that are reused by different business units within Rockwell to make customer-facing offerings. In my particular role, I have the responsibility for gathering the requirements and defining an architecture for a generic cloud platform that can be used by our different business units to make IoT and remote monitoring solutions.
Thanks, Scott. Before we get started on the more technology-oriented components that form the baseline or the platform of our industrial IoT capabilities, perhaps you can take just a minute and give us a high-level overview of what our current capabilities look like.
Absolutely. So on this slide, you can kind of see the traditional Rockwell offerings down at the bottom of the slide. We've always been known as an industrial automation hardware company, making things like PLCs and drives and different types of control automation equipment. And while that makes factories turn, it's always been kind of a closed space where that information stays within the automation environment. So when we started this path to the FactoryTalk Cloud, we developed a line of gateways that allowed us to effectively cloud-enable legacy hardware that was really created well before concepts of sending data to a cloud existed. Those gateways were developed as software with the idea of being somewhat elastic in nature, meaning that they could take the size and shape of whatever hardware they were put on. In this slide, you can see kind of form factors generically represented as small, medium, and large, meaning that a gateway could be sized for the application that it was required. In the case of an oil pipeline pumping station, we might use a small gateway that only costs a few $100s. But for other cases where we're collecting data from a whole plant, we might use a typical IT server rack with gateways on virtual machines collecting tens of thousands of data points. The idea is that it's scalable in its nature. At the next level, the FactoryTalk Cloud, hosted in Microsoft Azure, we ingest the data from the gateway. We organize that into a data model where we could logically represent the different assets our automation customers have. These might be individual machines, production lines, work cells, plants, enterprises, whatever the specific nature of the application is. Throughout all of that, security is key to this story. So we manage to encrypt the data in between the gateway and the cloud. We secure the data and encrypt it at rest using Microsoft technology. We make sure that all of the data is accessed through authenticated APIs, and those authenticated APIs map individual users to security roles that grant them or deny them access to this very specific data model objects that they're entitled to. That server is separated from the client layer, again with those secure APIs, meaning that we could iterate the gateway, the server, and client applications independently of each other. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the different client options that we have, giving users a wide variety of ways they can use that data. So out of the box, the FactoryTalk Cloud provides some self-serve dashboard capabilities. This is a tool we refer to as the Composer, and the Composer is a very simple and easy to use tool that allows users to drag and drop different dashboarding elements, whether they be trends and gauges or more automation specific graphics like those seen in the graphic here. It is easy for users to put those graphics onto a page, arrange them in the order they want, and easily bind them to the data elements coming from their control system. This is very consistent with other tools that automation users have, such as HMIs or human-machine interfaces that are typically on the plant floor, but it extends the experience to a remote audience that's not necessarily into the plant. Now, this allows users to have a consistent experience whether in the plant or remote. It also means that those same users have the ability to take that experience with them. Because we've used responsive design and modern web technologies, these same dashboards can be viewed on tablets and phones regardless of where the user is. Now, as Microsoft's advanced their own visualization technologies, we've incorporated integration with Power BI. This, of course, allows for a greater deal of slicing and dicing of large data sets. Where the Composer is really good for showing real-time and near-time data, Power BI is great at taking the last month or 6 months or a year worth of data and finding particular trends in the behavior of an automation environment. Now, where Rockwell's focused on IoT solutions, gathering data for near-time decision support, many of our larger customers have their own big data strategies. This would incorporate data from their sales and supply chain and customer sentiment, things that Rockwell's really not in the business for. But that automation data that we are expert at retrieving is a component in those strategies. So the FactoryTalk Cloud provides data integration abilities so that we can easily send the data from our platform into broadly available systems such as Hadoop, Apache Storm, and of course Microsoft's Cortana intelligence services for doing things like machine learning and other predictive analytics.
Thanks, Scott. Is this something that we've been working on for the past year? Is this something we've been working on for the past 5 years? How would you characterize the way Rockwell and Microsoft have been working together in this space?
Well, just about all IoT and cloud stuff is reasonably new. However, we started this journey back in 2011. I wasn't part of the journey initially. I worked kind of on the peripherals, if you will, but in those days, we started by taking a Rockwell application, a typical client-server N-tier application designed to run on a Windows PC, and we moved it to the Azure environment, hosted in VMs. Well, that was easy enough. We quickly figured out that just putting it in the cloud in a VM didn't exactly make it a cloud application. We didn't get the scalability or resiliency or any of the big cloud-type performance we were looking for. So with a lot of help from Microsoft, guidance with architecture and suggestions about technology, we re-architected VantagePoint to sit in an architecture as shown here. And what we're showing effectively on the left there is kind of a high-level description of that gateway, as it can send data to a few different ingestion points within our cloud. And we have that application now split across multiple web and worker roles and interacting with multiple data stores. Those data stores were Azure SQL DB, and we used web and worker roles, which are managed VMs. Those specific choices were something that differentiated Microsoft from other cloud providers because they effectively took the management responsibility of that infrastructure and made that part of the service. That meant Rockwell could focus on doing the application development that was necessary instead of learning how to manage IT resources in a cloud data center.
So Scott, one of our basic directives here at Rockwell Automation is not to replicate any of the technologies or capabilities that Microsoft is building. So obviously our architecture and our roadmap has adapted over time to the new capabilities that Microsoft has been launching, including IoT services and others. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Certainly. So while the last slide showed kind of the high-level architecture that hosts our FactoryTalk Cloud application, this slide's a very high-level kind of description of some of the services and how the pieces kind of hang together in a bookshelf-type manner. And so, like those opening slides, we kind of show a clean separation between the client applications at the top, the API in between those client applications, and the services in the server layer. And down on the bottom, we have our data ingestion pipelines, which are basically the ways that we get data in. And you can think of that as where the gateway kind of interacts. Now, in the bookshelf in the middle are different types of services that came to our FactoryTalk Cloud as part of the migration of FactoryTalk VantagePoint to the cloud. Things like, archive and operative stores, identity management, role-based security, basic event plugins, things like that are kind of key application components that you need in almost any big platform type application, let alone in a cloud application, were developed by Rockwell in this VantagePoint application with proprietary code and made to fit into a cloud application. But since we started the journey in 2011, Microsoft has expanded Azure tremendously. There are dozens upon dozens of services that didn't exist when we started that journey. So now we're on the journey of replatforming FactoryTalk Cloud to basically take advantage of more of those technologies that are now available. So while we built our initial implementation using web and worker roles, which are now considered classic services into Azure nomenclature, we're moving to using a more microservice architecture. That architecture will be hosted in the new Microsoft Azure Service Fabric, which again is a managed service for hosting microservices. But unlike some of the other microservice architectures, Microsoft's done some really neat things with Service Fabric. It's able to run both in the cloud and on-prem. It supports stateless microservices like you typically find with Docker and Kubernetes and others. But Microsoft has also introduced a concept of a stateful microservice using things like reliable dictionaries, which are fully replicated and resilient within the Service Fabric. So this slide is kind of showing where the red boxes are things that are proprietary Rockwell technologies, and the blue being Microsoft or other third parties. The intent is really to say, let's decompose our FactoryTalk Cloud application as it is and replace certain services with things that are now generally available from Microsoft. There's no reason for me to make a proprietary time series data store anymore when there's technologies like Microsoft RDX that we could leverage. It's no longer necessary for me to do things like wrap RDX extensions to do eventing when I can use streaming analytics. So the idea is to move from having a bunch of proprietary code that works almost as good as the new stuff from Microsoft and leverage the best that's available. Another good example of this is we're on the process of implementing Microsoft IoT Hub. This allows us to deprecate our own proprietary data ingestion pipelines for something that's more scalable and is constantly expanding. Recently, Microsoft IoT Hub has offered new device management capabilities and is soon to offer edge analytic capabilities that will allow us to do streaming analytics not just in the cloud, but push those same analytic algorithms down to our gateway devices. So the choice to go to Microsoft and to continually reevaluate the technology they have is definitely an ongoing thing, but it continues to provide more and more value, allowing us to focus on the things that differentiate Rockwell to its customers rather than just building and managing infrastructure.
That's great, Scott. So in summary, as Microsoft launches these new services, Azure services, IoT services, it's our stated objective to dovetail those as quickly as we can into our roadmap and into our technology development process and leverage them as effectively as we can. Is that fair?
Absolutely, absolutely. I will say it's kind of fun trying to keep up with Microsoft. It's a changing world, but I'm always surprised by the new stuff they have available.
Outstanding. So this has been a brief technology overview, very high level. Look back to the other list of videos that you can partake of here, and we'll talk a little bit more about the business value and the customer-facing capabilities that leverage this platform and that we've used to apply across all different industries, from oil and gas to food and bev to automotive to consumer goods, etc. So thank you and welcome back.